Welcome back to the Keizer Report. I'm Max Keizer. Time now to return to Craig Hemke of tfmetallsreport.com. Craig, welcome back.
Max, always fun to speak with you.
I wanted to continue on our conversation from before, just to fill in some of the gaps for those who are just joining us. We have a situation in the global economy, essentially, where the Japanese yen is a funding currency because the interest rates are so low. It's the cheapest to borrow in the world. They use those borrowed funds to buy into bonds of central banks that are holding them to keep prices, keep interest rates low, as a way to make it cheaper to roll over their toxic portfolios of junk debt and other debt and sovereign debt and all the garbage they've been accumulating over the past 10 years during the financial crisis, post-financial crisis, because if those bonds were allowed to trade freely in the market, then it would be obvious that these banks like Citibank, HSBC, Goldman Sachs, Warren Buffett's corporation are all technically bankrupt, and that would cause, of course, a seizure and credit freeze and a nuclear winter in global markets. And that won't happen. So this Ponzi scheme is perpetuated on the back of the Japanese yen, and this is reflected in the gold prices. As you pointed out, and Ned, Nathan, and Leyland have pointed out, if you take those two charts, you invert the gold chart, you see that these two are correlating brilliantly, because gold is the canary in the inflation gold mine. If that price is allowed to uptick at all, it would tear down this house of cards. And so this is all quite obvious. High frequency trading is the method of choice to manipulate these markets. And Craig, you left us kind of on a cliffhanger there, because you were talking about the VIX, which is the volatility index. Mm-hmm. So the volatility index is another one of these inventions by banks to help manipulate markets. Tell us more about it.
Well, it is, at the end of the day, Max, it's about managing the market and getting it to continue just to go straight up, right? If Ben Bernanke and the rest of his Fed governors and chairmen that talk about the wealth effect and how rising stock prices make everybody feel better and go out and buy refrigerators and new cars and all that kind of stuff. So they have this vested interest in keeping the stock market go up. And in fact, I would say that's like the Fed's primary indicator now for raising interest rates. Everything else going to heck. The U.S. economy isn't growing, there's no jobs, but yet the stock market goes up, so it's okay to hike rates, apparently. But it is all about high-frequency trading these days. This idea, I mean, it's kind of quaint now to think that there are actually people that are doing their homework and deciding to buy 200 shares of Coca-Cola because the fundamentals look good, that kind of stuff, and that's why the stock market's going up. Now, it's nothing to do with it anymore. 90%, 85%, whatever the number is, of total volume on the New York Stock Exchange is just simply high-frequency trading computers, just swapping positions back and forth, trying to nick each other for fractions of a penny, and doing it at the speed of light. And so the Fed and what these central bankers have figured out is that if you want to create this wealth effect, if you want to get the stock markets to go up, then you've got to get these high-frequency trading computers to do the heavy lifting for you. And with all of think of it, it's like any other computer program. It's all written with the same type of code, and they're all taking basically the same inputs, where a computer sees, for lack of a better metaphor, certain inputs going up, going down, and then those computers make decisions to buy or sell. In this case, stock futures or gold futures or whatever. And what the Fed has figured out, and what the other central bankers have figured out, and what the BIS, the Bank of International Settlements, has figured out, is if you can affect those inputs, if you can get the inputs to move, you can move all of the markets. A lot of folks sit there and say, well, the stock market can't be manipulated. It would take trillions and trillions of dollars to actually move the stock market. No, that's a gross oversimplification of how it works. You want to move the market, just simply move those high-frequency trading inputs. The computers will take over. They'll do all the heavy lifting for you. The two primary inputs in moving the stock market, at least here in the U.S., are the dollar yen that we talked about before, but also this VIX, the volatility index. If you can get the dollar yen to go up, or at the same time maybe get the VIX to go down, and recently this VIX index was at the lowest level in 25 years, if you can get either of those two things to happen, the computers will take over, they'll buy stock market futures, and up it'll go. Anybody can watch this. on a daily basis. All I got to do is take the time to sit and watch it every day, and you'll see that this is what's happening. We mentioned, I think it was a couple of days ago, this legendary investor by the name of Asher Edelman, who apparently the character Gordon Gekko was based on 30 years ago on the movie Wall Street. Asher Edelman was on Fast Money on CNBC, and he said basically what I just said, is that the plunge protection team, as he called it, the president's working group on financial markets, they're the ones in there driving the stock market higher. And everybody, rolled their eyes and threw their hands in the air. How can you say that? You can't manipulate the stock market, again, because of the dollar volume it would take. But that's a lack of understanding of how these things work in the 21st century. Markets are manipulated. Almost every market is manipulated, and it's done so by the banks for the reasons that you laid out just a couple minutes ago before I went on this rant, Max.
Right. Well, the dollar volume doesn't make any difference because the cost of borrowing and all this high-frequency trading is done with borrowed money is virtually zero. Again, getting back to the yen. But you mentioned how the program trading, the algorithmic trading, is affected by inputs. And one of those inputs are by bots that essentially read the financial press. And this is becoming more of a factor in trading these algorithms. When Janet Yellen goes on television and says, we fear inflation, the bots pick up on that, and they know then to start selling the gold manipulation schemes to bring that price down because they have heard or read the version of Janet Yellen saying, we have a fear of inflation, so we're not sure we're going to raise rates. So her job, Janet Yellen's job, is no longer to conduct monetary policy. It's not really the Federal Open Market Committee. It's not buying and selling. It's not working with the primary dealers on Wall Street. It's not about managing the money supply so much as manipulating the algorithmic trading using the bully pulpit of her position at the Federal Reserve chair to influence algorithmic trading, to influence high-frequency trading. And that's her primary job now, is to, if it looks like markets might be going in a direction that is disfavorable to Wall Street, she'll get on TV. That's why they're starting to do weekly press conferences now, or monthly press conferences now, because they are now catering to the algos. They're no longer observing any market fundamentals whatsoever. There is no school of economics that she follows. There is no data point other than a stock market data point, and so she becomes a toady, a servant of these computer algorithms, essentially, and that's her primary job, it sounds like, right?
Precisely. I agree 100%, Max, no doubt about it. And this is why now these guys are treated as rock stars. I mean, I call them just goons. I mean, Mother goes out there and she runs a show, and then she got all these goons for her governors that give multiple speeches. I mean, there was a day last week where there were 7 or 8 different Fed governors out giving speeches or television appearances, all doing exactly what you described. They're essentially trying to jawbone to get these computers to react the way that they want them to react, which is, either they want to get the dollar to go higher, they want to get the bond market to move in a certain way, or the stock market to move a certain way. And the media fawns all over them and cedes this power to them. I mean, look at CNBC. Whenever there's some Fed announcement, the minutes release, something like that, they'll have a countdown clock. This is the most earth-shattering development we've ever seen. Some mutterings of the Fed where they change a couple of words from the last times they put something out. And I'll give you one more, Max. I don't know if people have ever, if they pay attention to these things as it flows, but at the end of every FOMC meeting, the Fed puts out a statement, which, is breathlessly announced to the world by Steve Leisman and these other clowns in financial media. And then 3 weeks later, we get the FOMC minutes, the actual, things that they talked about during that meeting. What, you can't tell me that it takes 3 weeks for some, secretary or assistant or what stenographer at the Fed to transcribe the notes from the meeting and then put out, what the minutes are? Of course not. What the Fed does is they put out a statement at the conclusion of the meeting. Then they sit back and see, well, let's see, how was that received? Did we get the market response that we were looking for? Well, I was really hoping instead this would happen. So then 3 weeks later, you get the minutes. And a lot of times, people that observe this stuff, you'll notice the minutes don't match the statement. Well, then again, that gets back to what you're saying, Max. The Fed sits back and doesn't get the market response they want, so then they adjust the minutes to match maybe what they were trying to get. Again, this may sound like crazy talk to people out there that think, oh, no, that's not how the markets work. let me assure you, as someone that's been doing this for 30 years, but now just simply observing for the last 10, it's precisely how these markets, and I should probably do this with my fingers, how these markets work here in the 21st century.
Right. Well, I know for a fact. I mean, I invented a technology in 1996 called the virtual specialist technology, and it's referenced hundreds of times by subsequent patents by banks all over the world. And one of the features of that technology, that patented technology, is to change the ratio required to affect a price change up or down. So if there's an imbalance of buyers and sellers, if it's one-to-one buyers and sellers, the price is unchanged. If there's a balance in favor of buyers, you see an uptick. If there's a balance in sellers, in imbalance, you see a downtick. And by simply changing the ratio required to affect a price tick, you have, in effect, created an upward or downward bias. Now, that's patented technology. I know I invented it. It's used by hundreds of banks. It's used every day. It's part of this whole derivatives nightmare. Cantor Fitzgerald is the owner of the patent. They're big players in this market manipulation. They are a primary dealer after 9/11. And so this clear evidence, black and white, you can look it up, 5950176 is the U.S. patent number, the virtual specialist technology of Max Keizer. It's the smoking gun. It tells you how to manipulate market using high-frequency trading.
Right.
Well, anyway, so Craig, you know, in Japan, which is the biggest source of funds because of their participation in all this, we see explosion. You can bring it back to Bitcoin. In the use of Bitcoin, it's at a premium use of Bitcoin. The price goes higher in Japan. I don't think that's an accident, right? Because the people there want freedom from this manipulation. Your thoughts?
Yeah, it's not an accident anywhere, Max. And that's what's probably most exciting about Bitcoin. Those of us that have, and I've only owned Bitcoin since last summer. I started buying it $600-700, and there's people like you that have owned it really almost since the beginning, to your credit. But I mean, those of us that are in it think, oh my gosh, this is got to be about as far as it's gone, right? It can't be. I mean, the awareness, the global awareness of Bitcoin, anybody watching you and I today can, shout across their back fence at their neighbor and ask them what Bitcoin is, and you'll get this kind of quiz, what a Bitcoin? I don't have any idea what you're talking about. And the next time there's a financial crisis, right? When people are desperately searching for alternatives. The next time there's a bunch of bank bail-ins, and the awareness will be raised. So this idea that Bitcoin is somehow a bubble, I've seen people try to equate it to, to tulip mania, that kind of stuff. Oh, that day will come, I suppose.
All right, Craig, you got to cut it out there on the tulips. Thanks for being on the show.
Thanks, Max.
All right, that's going to do it for this edition of the Keizer Report with me, Max Keizer, and Stacey Herbert. Got to thank Craig Hemke of tfmetallsreport.com. You can reach us on Twitter at Keizer Report. Until next time, bye, y'all.